You know, I think, so first of all, I just want to say to the panel, thank you so much for coming and agreeing to do this. It's pretty brave. This is a topic that not a lot of marketers and tech companies want to talk about. So I'm going to ask each of you just a quick question with respect to Google and Facebook. So Google and Facebook, so Facebook is over 550 billion in market cap. Facebook is over 550. Google is over almost $800 billion in market cap. Like, it's pretty astonishing. And both of these companies are media companies. They make all their money from media. And their intentions were good, right? So they didn't start with this. So I'm gonna ask Tessa. So they didn't start with this, but they ended up here. So you clearly are saying, basta, enough, solve this. But what advice? So give me, and then I'd like to have the panel just sort of weigh in, and then we're going to throw it to the audience for questions.
What I would say, yes,
Testing.
it is on, but okay. They're huge. But they're not the only way of doing this, and they're not going to be here forever in the same way that they've been doing. Facebook has already stepped back very significantly from news distribution in particular. That's why we've seen the implosion of those types of publishers on their platform. I don't think that, I think what we need to be doing is being our own disruptors and thinking very differently about how we reach people and I think people are starting to, as consumers and customers and audiences of content are starting to awaken to that as well and starting to want agency around that. I'm very impressed and amazed by younger people that I speak to, and even seeing the way that the high school students from the Florida shooting understand social media such deep and significant ways, and marketing, and how to communicate messaging. So I'm very optimistic about it. Yes, it's scary when you think about, a company like Google or Facebook could just squash our little tiny company. But at the same time, we're motivated by very different things, and I think that everybody can play their own role in the space, and they clearly don't want this. I'm happy to take it on.
Right, and so you came from Duracell, this incredible video. It's like I had to hold myself back from crying. So that runs somewhere, and then you realize it's running in a place that you had no intention or no control. And your customer calls and says, I just saw this on a site for, I don't know, the NRA or something, right? Because that's what happens when you just put it out there and let the impressions just go. Yeah. Now that you've had that view, so you've kind of sat in this, how do you navigate? What do you say to marketers that are dealing with some of these issues?
I think, back to how the industry is thinking about it is, so if, we can sit here and say it's Google and it's Facebook. It's all of us. We're the ones who put money into it, right? So, let's take responsibility for that. Yeah. It's a drug. If supposing we keep pumping money into it, as far as they're concerned, they're having a ball with it. You just said $800 billion Google and, $500 billion Facebook. They were on a ride, and so why would they stop unless they didn't realize that there were things that were going wrong. And so we all need to take collective responsibility. I think the only way we all know, whether it's politics, it's religion, or whether that is branding, money talks. And so we need to have a concerted effort as brand builders to make sure that we are voting with our dollars and putting it where we know what's happening with it, and not going ahead and putting it in places where a video of yourself could be seen by, at the NRA site and stuff.
And Graham, what happens to a brand when, what's the view? It used to be that you controlled content and context, and you controlled, and they were perfectly aligned. And it wasn't perfect, as we know, but at least you controlled it. Now you can't. It's the Wild West. What advice do you give marketers?
Yeah, it's less of the Wild West than it was the last 5 years. And I know we're picking on Facebook and Google, and they're the two biggest animals, but there's a lot worse out there than Facebook and Google. And I actually think I seem to be one of the only few that I can envision in the 2020s will be moving back to more of the oligopoly. And I actually think that's good for marketers. We're looking at two cases where two of the biggest advertisers in the world have gone to the big media giants and said, please shape up. You couldn't have done that 5 years ago because you would have had to go to 500 people. And there was no consolidation. So the more consolidation, the better. And I actually think, there's a term that, the idea that I still think there's a lot of consolidation ready to happen. And I don't know who's going to buy everybody, but if you look at every marketplace, forget just media, because we're just talking media here, but every marketplace starts this way, and then they consolidate, and then they buy each other up. So if you start to think about who's going to buy each other up, I mean, the launch of Disney next year on TV is going to rattle everybody. And I don't think people are ready for that because they have huge content and good quality content. I mean, there's a lot of crap on Netflix. You look at a show and then you look on IMDb and see it's like 5, 6, and you're like, oh, crap. But I just think that we're picking on Facebook and Google, but there's so many other bad ones, and we haven't even mentioned Twitter. How would you like to see your lovely ad squeezed between 2 Donald Trump tweets?
Yeah,
Which
sure.
it could be.
Sure, for sure. Elisa, you have a really interesting view because you came very recently before Northeastern University. You were at the DMZ and you worked with a number of players that were trying to raise money, trying to work as hard as they can to just do everything they can to, work in the space. And I know just in my own experience there's a bit of a moral line, and sometimes, good cop, bad cop, you go with the money. And I'm sure you've seen this multiple times with startups and kind of how they're, navigating and the right thing to do versus what advice do you give them, particularly now that you're sitting kind of in you're moving into education, you're thinking about how do you solve those, what are the conversations? So give me some examples of some of the conversations that perhaps you heard in that environment.
Around marketing?
Around, yeah, like the line, right? Like, because this is all about, when dollars drive decisions, you go with the money versus the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is...
I think startups are in a really difficult position at times. I mean, you're starting from a position where you're bootstrapping yourself. Hopefully you have a little bit of VC funding. If you have VC funding, the VCs are on you like a hawk. And I think every single dollar, every single decision, how you spend your money, all of that stuff has, it has such an impact, right? So where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? And so I can talk about my journey, and so I've seen startups work through that. So do you go on some very crowded channel where you can control content but not context, and then there's that risk? I mean, you don't have the policing abilities
to get the cheapest CPA.
Right, to get the cheapest, but then, who are you associated with, and are you projecting quality onto the world? I mean, and I think this concept of quality is really critical, especially if you're trying to disrupt a certain thing. And I mean, that's what, quite frankly, we're going through right now as I think through, what do I want Northeastern's brand to be in Toronto? I could go and put ads, and no offense to anyone who puts ads on the subway, but I could go put ads on every single subway. Is that what I want to do? I could put a whole bunch of digital ads. Is that what I want to do?
Where's your consumer, though?
That's it.
Why don't we keep talking about that?
Right.
Because I was on YouTube a couple of months ago and saw a Rolex ad.
Right.
Should they ever be on YouTube? Like, ever? You should be walking into the
I don't know,
person's
for the
office.
first time ever, I noticed Rolex sponsoring the Academy Awards last night.
Yeah.
First time ever. They typically
It's
don't
better
do
than
that.
YouTube.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
to me, it was also either it's a change in, something changed for them to
Did
do
they know
that.
Wimbledon and
Exactly.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I totally agreed with what you said, is that you have to go to where your consumers are, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we don't want to take the spray and pray approach. We just don't want to do that. And also, I don't want to do that not only because it's not going to be a good ROI, but also because it doesn't scream quality for me. it doesn't scream like we actually know where our customer is.
So Andrew, sort of give us your view. You are a creative person, you work for a PR company, you work on hundreds of collaborations and brands. What are some of the conversations and the struggles that they're having?
How much time do we have? Do we have?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So every conversation, while I used to work in the Badlands, the ad world, and I now work in PR, communications I'll call it, and the conversations are the same, but there's so many more conversations, and I wish I could tell you all about some of these conversations because it's fascinating stuff. And I'll share one. Is anybody here from Volkswagen? Thank God. Okay, so we worked on what just happened. They asked me to come in to give a perspective, even though I had not met the client yet. But this is right after the shit hit the fan. So, and the ad agency was presenting some ideas. And so I went, okay, listened, went, and then I was like, okay, they finished their presentation, and I was like, all right, I'm the first one who's going to talk. What is this? Because it was irresponsible. It was cutesy. It was just trying to be clever. It wasn't addressing the issue. And then somebody, I'm not going to say where at the client or how high up they were, but went on to explain to me why this wasn't a big issue. And I said, let's never have that conversation again. This is good learning. Nobody can ever hear you do that because that is the wrong response. We struggle with this every day because you go, oh, it's a client. They must pay you a lot of money. But it is our responsibility collectively, everyone here, to when you see something go like, you know what, it's just not right. And it could be like, it's not right, it's not smart marketing, but it's definitely got to be, it's not right ethically, and it'll really screw you in the end because it will catch up to you one way or the other.
Okay, so look, I'm sorry that we've gone long, and I have to say thank you, everybody, for staying. I want to throw it to the audience. Who has a question for the panel? And I will try to get at least two. So who's got a question for the panel? Anyone? Yep.
So the trust report, you said that Canadian companies were trusted more. How do Canadian companies then get more voice in the corporate marketplace?
Versus, oh, you mean like other countries, or you mean, yeah, okay. Well, the thing that we don't do a great job of is when things are good, we don't take advantage of it. Like when things are bad, it's just like, oh God, things are bad. So I think there's a few different trust drivers. I can't believe I'm talking about trust drivers. Anyway, there are trust drivers, but the CEO has a responsibility. Employees have a huge responsibility. And actually, last year's data showed that employees were actually more influential than the CEO, and that actually has rebounded a little bit. But I think that's where we have to look, as an organization and go like, okay, we got a good thing going. Let's share it with the world. The world is a messed up place in a lot of ways, and sometimes it's really hard. But if you follow the path, people and back to consumers will go like, you got to look at this company. Let's hold this company up. Let's hold this platform up. These are the ones who are doing it right. So if you follow, and don't go to the dark side, my estimation is, and what I've seen from the data, is that consumers and success will follow.
Okay, one more question. Yes. Stand up and shout, and I will come and grab you. Okay, here you go.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about kind of building a brand and kind of this being steward of the brand and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, I guess, from more of like a content marketing background. So thinking digital, thinking websites, online properties, that kind of stuff. How do you balance building a brand with kind of delivering positive ROI? So thinking of content specifically, but also just generally.
Before I answer, what do you see as the difference between those two, building a brand and ROI? Because I don't.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
all I do is
I think they're
branding.
linked, but I'm thinking more of kind of like the weekly,
Okay.
quarterly, monthly
Okay.
metrics that you have to deliver.
Yeah, so let's think about brand health and brand wealth. And what I think's happening right now is people are going for brand wealth too quickly. Everything's becoming transactional. I actually, at the end of every year, try to think of what was the best work out there. And I was actually very depressed to think about 2017 because there's not a lot of great work. And Coke last year decided to put their was it Coke or McDonald's? Put their agency on the same retainer sales only, paid per, like gave them such a low, but that's bad. Because as a marketer for 20 years, it's really hard to balance the long term and the short term, but they estimate that it should be somewhere in the 50-50 of keeping the brand health and whatnot going. And I think we've become so transactional, we need a sale by next Thursday, so here it goes. And what happens is, eventually I don't know why I'm buying a certain brand. Why am I eating cornflakes? I haven't seen an ad on cornflakes. Mm-hmm. Well, a great example is Tim Hortons. When's the last time you saw an equity Tim Hortons ad? It's always just coffee and a muffin, $1.49, like all the time. But there's no, like it's less great work. We need more great work. We need less. We need to balance the transactional with the great work that actually reaches and inspires consumers.
I'm going to give the last word to Mr. Valley.
I think most of the stuff has been said. It is tough. It's not easy. My only thought would be is in how you set the expectations. All right. So when we would go in and present our budgets and all that sort of stuff, the ROI absolutely mattered, but the ROI did not take precedence, which is this year versus NPV of a project. Okay? So you need to think in 3 and 5 year horizons. You need to think about things in a way which is going to give you return over a period of time, and you set those expectations. And if you set those expectations, people will come along with you. But if you are in a hurry, then obviously that's exactly what will happen. When I say you, I didn't mean you individually. All of us, if we are in a hurry, then the transaction is exactly where we land up.
So thank you so much. So listen, I want to thank the panel. You guys did a great job, incredibly interesting. Hopefully you can engage with this team later in the tweets. Get involved, everybody. We're looking for speakers and volunteers, sponsors and partners. Please call us at techto.org. And our next event is on April the 23rd. How is tech changing search? Voice search, visual search. Google's actually going to be on the panel, so it'll be a big one for us. So $20 early bird. Get your tickets now. Thanks so much, guys.